happened in Libya? Is Obama the bomber getting ready for Syria? First black president, the masses were hungry, but the same president just bombed an African country like.
After you divorce yourself from the right-wing propaganda campaign, it's all simple and plain. America stands the game. Your president got an African name. Now who you gon' blame when they drop the bombs out of them planes using depleted uranium? That's how they do it. See the game they running. Give a fuck if he's cunning, articulate and handsome. Afghanistan held for ransom by the hand of this black man, neo-colonial puppet, white power with a black face. He said, fuck it, I'll do it. A master of disguise, expert at telling lies. Then they gave him a Nobel Peace Prize. Should've known he was trained in Chicago. Word to Chairman Fred and Mark Clark. What they do in the dark will come out in the light like a WikiLeaks site. So I guess Nkrumah was right. Who's ready to fight? Last stage of imperialism, I ain't kidding. In the immortal words of Marvin Gaye, this ain't living.
On the very, very serious situation that's developing in Syria. A massively brave and courageous and distinguished fight is being put up by the Syrian people under the leadership of President Assad. And we think it's the absolute duty of working class and oppressed people all over the world to give their full support to those people resisting imperialism. We have had to fight within the left-wing movement in this country against the all-persuasive bourgeois propaganda against the Assad regime. Our chairman, Harpal Brar.
There are two meetings really taking place today which are very important. There's a counter-revolutionary gathering of imperialism and its stooges which is taking place today in Geneva under an umbrella organization called Friends of Syria, i.e. the enemies of the people of Syria and the enemies of all humanity, and purveyors of obscurantism, brigandage and banditry, not only in the Middle East but wherever they possibly can lay their hands on. And secondly, there is a rival meeting taking place, of which you are the proud participants. This is in London's Marchmont Centre, and it is the one that really is entitled to call itself the Friends of Syria. But it's no bad thing that various entrenched stooges of imperialism like Ben Ali in Tunisia and Mubarak in Egypt were overthrown. And although it's for the moment only a process of overthrowing those regimes and not going on to yet build anything progressive, nevertheless it's a step in the right direction. And as soon as that had happened, imperialism then suddenly and blatantly realizing that they had been on the wrong side of history. Once they realized and saw the writing on the wall, suddenly they became advocates of democracy and freedom. And the purpose of being on the side of democracy was to try and manipulate that emerging movement in the interests of imperialism to make sure that if Mubarak had gone, the Mubarak system will continue without Mubarak. Who will win and who will lose, we do not know at the moment. But we are absolutely certain that people who went to Tahrir Square and people who up and down Egypt staged massive demonstrations and braved the police bullets and even braved the army, although the army did not directly participate at that time. Nevertheless, these people would not allow their revolution to be stolen easily. So we continue to hope. But nevertheless, it's a measure of imperialism's resourcefulness and flexibility that it can use events like the events in Tunisia and Egypt in order to wage a war first against Libya and now against Syria. Now, imperialism says it's waging, it doesn't say it's waging a war. Imperialism says it's involved in Syria in support of human rights, democracy, and freedom. Now, let's see who are these Democrats who are trying to bring human rights first to the people in Libya and now to the people of Syria. Well, these Democrats include, foremost among them, Anglo-American imperialism. What's their record in democracy? Britain has murdered people all over the world, from Ireland to India and many faraway lands. United States of imperialism has done precisely the same. Ever since the slaveholders' republic came into existence in the late 18th century, it has continued to subjugate people. first in Latin America, and then far beyond. In my own lifetime, they've been responsible for killing 1.5 million Iraqis. They have killed tens of thousands of people in Afghanistan. They killed 4 million people in Indochina. They killed 4 million people in Korea. And 10,000 here, 20,000 here. They are knee deep in blood. And when Hillary Clinton says she cannot tolerate Bashar al-Assad denying human rights and life to Syrian people, I just really can only admire the hypocrisy of the person who is uttering these words. And who are the other Democrats? Well, they are the Zionists of Israel. Now, their democracy is such that they've gone thousands of miles away to steal other people, the Palestinian people's land. Continue to occupy that land, continue to deny the Palestinian people the right to exist, and continue even today, as I speak to you, to evict Palestinian people from their homes and from their land, who have turned this little Gaza Strip into the largest prison camp known since the Second World War. These are the Democrats that we're talking about. Who are the other Democrats? Well, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Kuwait say that President Bashar al-Assad's regime has lost democratic legitimacy. I mean, there is absolutely no connection between thought and language here. Democracy, legitimacy. Now, these are people who rule in the name of divine right of kings. There were people who were put into power by British colonialism. The House of Saud was brought into power by the British. Other rival claims were defeated because Britain had the power to do so. And then, as soon as oil was discovered, they were transferred literally from camels to Cadillacs. And all their wealth is personal wealth. It's owned by King Abdullah and 10,000 other bloated princes. There's no Saudi parliament. There's no elections in Saudi Arabia. Women cannot even drive in Saudi Arabia. A woman cannot go out on her own unless she's accompanied by a man, and that man can be a 6-year-old boy who accompanies the woman to the supermarket, and the woman is perfectly safe in the hands of this little brat, right? So these are the Democrats. Bahrain is another democratic country. What does Bahrain do? As soon as people stand up and say, we'd like to have freedom of speech, the Bahraini police attack them, they follow them into the hospitals where they kill people, and they torture doctors, imprison doctors, nurses, and anybody else. If anybody treated a member of the opposition in a hospital, then the doctor himself is subject to prosecution. And when there was a danger that this oil well with a flag, because that's what many of these countries are. They're not countries. They're oil wells put together by British imperialism and American imperialism in order to loot Arab people's oil wealth in the interest of imperialism. As soon as there was a danger they might be overthrown, then with a nod and a wink from Washington and London, the Saudi army moved in to suppress them. Do you hear a lot from people who run the AM program, Channel 4 News, the Newsnight? No, there's nothing of the kind. The fact of the matter is, very little time is devoted to reporting them. Every crime in the world has been committed by those who oppose imperialism. Gaddafi was the great murderer, the great criminal, and now Bashar al-Assad now has become the great criminal. As far as I know, he's a perfectly mild-mannered doctor who was thrust into this position because his father died. He was not even interested in becoming a president. But such is the system in some countries. They say, well, no, you've got to come because you're the right person. In my view, he's no dictator of any kind. What is his dictatorship? His dictatorship is there are certain things that Syria has done which imperialism does not like. What are these things that Syria has done? First of all, Syria opposed the war against Libya. It was one of the only 3 countries that had the courage to vote against the United Nations resolution on that. The other countries were Cuba and Ecuador. Glory to these 3 countries who could defy imperialism when even big countries and big powers shied away from that. That's what Gaddafi said at a meeting of the Arab League. You must not laugh because Saddam Hussein, he said, we had differences with him because he is being murdered by foreign occupiers of Iraq. Tomorrow it could be your turn. And everybody laughed. And Gaddafi, of course, knew very well what could happen, that they could turn against him. Of course, he didn't always realize that he will come to the end that he came to. But nevertheless, he pointed out the truth, that that is what could happen. And therefore, it's very important for countries, powerful countries like Russia and China, to oppose imperialist brigandage. Because after all the little wars, all the power of imperialism is actually directed towards Russia and China. These are the countries that could harm imperialism, and that's what imperialism is trying to do, to encircle China, to encircle Russia. From every angle, through Central Asia, through Asia Pacific, through Australia, to a number of other places. It's trying to cobble together alliances. And this great Democrat, people used to say, if a black man comes into the White House, things will improve. We were very pleased when Obama was elected, for the simple reason that this will disabuse people of the notion that a change of personnel would actually make US imperialism any different. Whoever becomes the president of the United States of America, God forbid, if I became the president of the United States of America, my job will be as chief executive of the United States to defend American imperialism and not have some funny ideas about human rights, democracy, and freedom. Because if I entertain those ideas, somebody put a bullet in my head, apart from depriving me of the cushy life that I would be leading as the president of the United States. And it's Obama who is taking troops to Asia Pacific, taking troops to Australia, and he has declared that America is a Pacific power, and 60% of the American armed forces would be concentrated in Asia Pacific. That they will have a missile defense shield, which will make America's defenses invulnerable to any attack. And you know why they will have these missile defense shields? A, to protect themselves against North Korea, and B, against Iran. Iran has no weapons of mass destruction. Korea has, but Korea's weapons of mass destruction are entirely there to defend the sovereignty and the social system of Korea. No less a person than that despicable woman who was Clinton's foreign secretary, Mrs. Albright, Madeleine Albright. She said Iraq was invaded because Saddam Hussein had no weapons of mass destruction. North Korea is not because it has weapons of mass destruction. Imperialism has a habit of teaching people lessons. And lessons is, it does not recognize reason. It does not recognize human rights and justice. It only recognizes power. If you are powerful enough, you can be left alone. If you're weak, and you will, particularly if you're weak and you've got wealth, then you must be pounced upon because you are obviously ripe you are a ripe fruit, ripe for the taking. That's what imperialism does. Imperialism does not seek freedom and democracy, it seeks domination. It's not something new. Lenin pointed that out over 100 years ago. And it's something that the working class movement must learn. Imperialism is no friend of democracy and human rights. If they're really that much worried about poverty and human rights, 45 million Americans have no health cover. Why can't they use their wealth to give health cover to their own people? 20% of the American households are short of food. If they're so concerned about human rights and alleviating poverty, why can't they attend to poverty in the midst of this most powerful and the richest country in the world? They can't, because it's not the function of a rich or a poor country to look after poor people. It's the function of a particular social system. Capitalism and imperialism are not capable of looking after the interests of people. The other Democrats are the ones, the terrorist thugs, who've been handed weapons by imperialism and by its stooges in the Gulf. People who've been given weapons, who go into crowded places, either shoot from the rooftops to kill innocent people, or they go into villages and commit massacre after massacre, and then post these pictures on the web and saying this is what the Syrian army has done. And of course, I wouldn't say gullible imperialist media. I would say the pliant imperialist media churns them out because it's in the interest of imperialism to do so. And then, of course, somebody breaks ranks from within the imperialist camp. No less a magazine than the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung came up and said the Hula massacre had nothing to do with the Syrian army. It was committed by the so-called Free Syrian Army. But it's only free in the sense that it freely lends itself to imperialism. It's free in no other way. It's a servant of imperialism. That's what it does. They're the ones who go on committing massacre after massacre. Killing old people, killing children, killing people for no other reason that they belong to some different religion. The Syrian regime is a secular regime, and precisely for that reason, it commands the support of the overwhelming majority of the Syrian people. The Syrian Ba'ath Socialist Party has 3 million members. It's a country of 23 million. 3 million means that, 10% or more are members of the party. And then if you take their families into account, you can see the wide circle of friendship and support that party enjoys. And it's not the only party that's the ruling party. It has a number of progressive organizations, 8 or 9, which are allied with it in the Progressive National Front. That's why the Syrian regime is so stable. That's why the Syrian regime can afford to hold elections. That's why the Syrian people can even go along and say there are certain reforms that they must make. So there's really not a question of democracy. The question is, why is Syria being targeted? Not only does it follow an independent policy, at least a foreign policy, and to a certain extent even economic policy, it also, apart from opposing the Libyan war, it supports the people of Palestine in their liberation struggle. It has, horror of all horrors, an alliance with Hezbollah, the Lebanese resistance movement, the only movement in the Arab world which fought Israel to a standstill, and if you use the boxing analogy, although it didn't give Israel a knockout blow, by a point system, I think it was the winner in that match. Israel was unable to defeat this little heroic movement. This really is a case of the little David beating the big monster Goliath. Without American imperialism, it's not possible for the Israeli state to exist. It has no basis for existence, economically, politically, ideologically, materially, etc. The first stage of this war is demonization in the media. You start suddenly saying that Bashar al-Assad is a monster. You repeat it every day, Goebbels fashion, till everybody believes Bashar is a monster. So you give a multiple choice question. There are boxes. Bashar, very nice man, not so nice man, monster. You just tick, Bashar is a monster. Because people can get used to a propaganda that is given to them all the time. So Syria has been demonized. What is there to demonize about Syria? Compared with the regimes around, Syria is really light years ahead of those regimes. But imperialism, as Lenin pointed out a long while ago, is a sign of its degeneration, that in the selfish interest of its money bags, of its these financial swindlers and barons of finance, it has made an alliance with the most medieval regimes in order to keep society backward in those areas. That's what they do. They need the Arab people's wealth, and therefore they have to keep their stooges in power. I put it to you that the rulers of these countries are not local. They may look like Arabs, they might have dark skin compared with Europeans, but they actually belong to the camp of imperialism. That's where they belong. That's where they really enjoy themselves most. Having demonized Syria, the second stage is then to get a few dozens of terrorists who go around throwing bombs. And the moment they've thrown bombs, it furnishes an excuse that Syrian army is killing people and Syria must be brought to heel. That's one thing it does. So it becomes a source for further demonization of the regime. First you create mayhem, you create murder, you kill, and then you intervene in the name of human rights and you kill even more but the basic purpose is always subjugating people. On top of supplying weapons to the terrorists, imperialism has of course imposed sanctions on Syria. European Union has applied an oil embargo. Syria is not a big producer of oil, but most of its oil exports come to the European Union, notably to Italy and Germany. These countries, under the duress by United States of imperialism, are applying sanctions. And of course, imperialism can make life difficult because of the transactions through the banks. Very often, payments for oil have got to go through some American financial center like New York. They're going further now. They're in the process of establishing what they call safe havens and humanitarian corridors on the borders of Syria, with Turkey, with Jordan, with Lebanon. And they want to create these little places, and the purpose of these places is to lure people away from other parts of Syria to these places, and then get a few of their terrorist thugs to attack the Syrian army. And what do you think the Syrian army does? It pursues them. They're shooting at the Syrian army, the Syrian army shoots back, and no doubt some bullets will go across the border. A bullet goes into Turkey, what a sacrilege. So what would they do? They will respond to it by an armed attack. Worse still, if Syria then fights back, Turkey is a member of NATO. NATO has a treaty. One of its articles says an attack on one is an attack on others. Well, they've all been waiting for this golden opportunity to go and attack Syria. So Turkey is attacked, and they will all go and attack. As the time has gone on, and the Syrian regime has conducted itself with great discipline and patience, I don't think I would have the patience to behave like that. I have to admire them for the patience with which they have dealt with the situation. Arab League comes and says, we must have monitors on the ground to see whether Assad is using excessive force. So the monitors are sent. Lo and behold, the monitors say the Assad regime is not using excessive force. In January of this year, they gave a report. And straight away, the monitoring group, established by the Arab League, was denounced by the Arab League. So two things have frustrated imperialism's plans so far to have a regime change in Syria. One is the opposition of People's Republic of China and Russia. Security Council would not allow a resolution to be passed because they have veto powers there. And the second thing, and this is the more important of the two, is the steadfastness with which the Syrian regime and the Syrian people have defended themselves. They've defended themselves because they can see all around them what has happened to countries that actually bowed to the American and British diktat. They've been ruined. Libya is not a country anymore. Libya is a fiefdom for a dozen different bandits. And it's quite sometimes really poetic justice that very people who overthrew the Gaddafi regime and put these Islamic fundamentalists in power suddenly find that these fundamentalists come and kill a freedom-loving American diplomat. And apparently there was no opposition. I mean, it is the job of the host country to defend the embassies that are stationed there. And suddenly, all the people who were supposed to be defending this embassy, a consulate in Benghazi, were to be found wanting, and they were having cups of tea somewhere. So there was nobody to defend. There were a couple of Navy SEALs defending this ambassador, so they cowered into some safe room, and they died of asphyxiation, we are told, because it was firebomb. And the Americans are now trying to find out who's done it. And the so-called government of Libya says, oh, it's some loony group, it's got nothing to do with us. But they're all loonies. I mean, who wanted to overthrow? Who wanted to overthrow the Libyan regime which had done so much for Libya? You'd have to be a loony to overthrow them and get this lot there. Now that they have run out of all the options, Russia and China won't play ball. And the Syrian people stand in steadfast defense of their sovereignty, their honor, their dignity, and their independence. So what does imperialism do? It has come to a point where it has to either decide directly to invade or give up the game. I am no crystal ball gazer. I do not know what will happen. But one thing is certain, if they do decide to invade, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to come out of it unscathed. It's a very different country from Libya. Libya was a very large country with a small population and centers of population separated from each other. Syria is very, very different. And should they start war against Syria, it will involve not only Hezbollah in Lebanon, it would involve Iran, and it's even possible that it might involve other countries. And it will become, if not a world war, it will become a regional war with very fearful and dire consequences. And imperialism has to think about it. On the one hand, there is the compulsion. Imperialism in crisis is hitting up. It finds no other way than war to save its skin. And yet, if it goes into war, there's no certainty that it will come out of that war very well. Didn't imperialism go to war in the First World War? What happened? It ushered in the great and glorious Soviet Union. Didn't imperialism, to save its skin, go to war in the Second World War? Instead of destroying the Soviet Union, it ushered in a whole socialist camp. And so you don't know what will come out of this war. So imperialism is in a quandary. There's a Chinese story of a man who was dying of thirst. And the only drink he had to hand was a cup full of poison. If he does not drink, he dies of thirst. If he drinks, he dies of poisoning. So imperialism has a choice of either giving up. If it gives up, it's beaten. That's not a very good example. It encourages everybody else to cock a snook at imperialism. You can do nothing to us. What could you do to Syria? You can do nothing to us. And if they, on the other hand, go in, the consequences of that would be very, very dangerous indeed. The Free Syrian Army has committed every possible atrocity, and it's really not an army, if you like. It's a groups of bandits who don't even agree with each other. They don't have a political representation. That's precisely why Hillary Clinton and William Hague, if it's possible to say, they're on their knees before this opposition, almost in desperation say, please, could you get your act together? Can you speak with one voice? Can we actually have some kind of a Syrian National Council? There's not a Syrian National Council. There's some half a dozen people who sit in Turkey or Paris, and they call themselves the Syrian National Council. Well, you can call yourself the Syrian National Council. And so, basically, there is no opposition. And without leadership, it's not possible to win. There is no base that they control. It's very unlike Libya, where at least the counter-revolutionaries had some hold, albeit with the help of imperialism, on Benghazi, from where they could spread out. But that is not the case in Syria. And as I said, the Syrian regime has acted with great caution and with great discipline and patience. They've done everything that was required of them. Is that our mission? Fine. An armed peace plan? Yes. But the moment some peace plan comes, imperialism shudders in its shoes because peace is broken up. Although it speaks about peace and democracy, the one thing it does not want is peace and democracy. Democracy would be that the opposition took part in elections in Syria. There have been council elections in December last year. There have been the parliamentary elections this year. There was the referendum on the new constitution this year. But could the opposition not test its strength by actually asking people to vote for that? No, they didn't. They said, we're not, because it's a sham. You boycott it because you know what the ballot box will deliver. It's not going to be very good. The results are going to be horrible, so you don't take part in that. Then, as one of our comrades wrote in one of the articles, imperialism refuses to take yes for an answer. They say, yes, we'll do it. They say, no, that's not an answer we want from you. We want you to say no. It actually sort of degenerates into the life of Brian type of situation, in my view. It's very much on the cards that war will break out in Syria. Whether this war breaks out or not is one thing that we in the working class movement have to do. And that is, first, oppose imperialist war. Our slogan in the working class movement has to be no cooperation with imperialism's wars for domination and profiteering. Whatever the price for us, we would say we will not fight in these wars. We will not manufacture armaments for these wars. We shall not transport these weapons. And if you like, we shall not conduct propaganda on behalf of imperialism. We shall not write in newspapers in favor of imperialism wars. I know we are crying in the wilderness. I know we do not have sport among the masses of the people at the moment. But unless we raise these questions and make people conscious, we will never have the sport of the people. When the time comes for getting that sport will not be there because nobody has even raised that question. And be it said to the honor of the working class in the imperialist countries, notwithstanding all the propaganda that the working people are subjected to, majority of the people in most of the countries waging the war are against these wars. Yes, they do not have any effect. 2 million people can march to Hyde Park, but it has no effect. While they are marching, the military airplanes fly over their heads and they're on their way to a bombing mission in Iraq or wherever they happen to be fighting. But they can only be stopped, and the working class alone has the power to stop, i.e., we will not cooperate with this war. That is the slogan that must permeate the working class movement. And anybody in the working class movement who does not put forward that slogan, in my view, is a charlatan, is a flunky of imperialism, even if he regards himself as the best socialist, if you like. He may be Tony Benn, he may be Jeremy Corbyn, he may be Brother Murray from the CPB, he may be John Rees of the Trotskyite notoriety and various other counter-revolutionaries. The fact of the matter is, they are on the other side of the barricades and they must be regarded as scoundrels and enemies of the working class that they are. That's very important. The second thing is, as Lenin said, the struggle of the proletariat for its social emancipation in the imperialist countries would be a humbug and a sham unless the proletariat in its struggle for socialism was actually closely involved with the people's struggles, people who are oppressed by its own bourgeoisie. Hundreds upon hundreds of millions of people who are oppressed by its own bourgeoisie. So our slogan is, in these wars, we want the defeat of our own ruling class, our imperialism, and we want the victory of the people who are victims of imperialism. Even today, people who don't have a very forward-looking social outlook are giving a bloody good fight to imperialism because they live in a completely different era which is the creation of the October Revolution, which is the era of the general crisis of imperialism and the downfall of imperialism and the era of incoming socialism. It's no point wishing there was another leadership. That has to be created by the people on the ground. It's not us who will create the leadership. It is they who will create the leadership. Let people decide their own future, and in each country, people will, in the end, find the right leadership. In my own life, the Middle East was not reactionary. Middle East was not affected by Islam or religious fundamentalism. It was a place where communists were bubbling with energy. 10% of the Iraqi population was members of the Iraqi Communist Party. Sudanese had a strong Communist Party. Egypt had a certain presentation of communists, etc. So imperialism sees them as a danger. It joins with the nationalists to finish off the communists. As soon as the communists were finished, imperialism then finishes off the nationalists. Now, if you finished off the communists and finished off the nationalists, who's left there to fight? The opposition all goes to the mosque. But one thing is certain, whatever their language, whatever their social outlook, these people are fighting against imperialism and deserve our support, whatever our differences are. If somebody stands up in Saudi Arabia and says, in the name of Allah the All-Merciful, I want to throw out the American devils out of our country and its stooges, the Saudi princes. Well, don't expect me to say Marxism does not use such language. I will be standing there applauding. Go on, brother, do it. The quicker you do, the better it is. So, comrade, these are the slogans that we must take into the working class movement. Probably have taken a little more than the time you would have allotted me normally, but I'm lucky that some speakers have not appeared here yet. So thank you for listening to me. That's all I had to say.
Keep your hand on your gun. Don't you trust anyone.
Diction, immediate deletion of people's existence. Who says what isn't legitimate resistance? To push these buttons, you don't